So my testosterone's 200. I've got diabetes. I'm tired. Who feels comfortable giving me tea? Who's worried about my heart? Darshan, sorry. Looks like Ryan won. So maybe we can chat a little bit about formulations and the alternatives of injection, topical, or now oral. Darshan, maybe you could share a little bit about what's new in terms of oral therapies.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's kind of an important consideration. We kind of talked a little bit about polycythemia and increasing hematocrit. And, in my practice, first line generally is injections, so cypionate, which carries a pretty significant risk of polycythemia. And a lot of the focus is on, what do they start with and what do they end up with? Generally, their hematocrit is going to increase 5 points when they start testosterone therapy. In some patients, it may be more. But if they're starting at, 49 and they go to, 54, is that as much of a concern versus someone that, was 39 and they went to 49? Where I would argue that they're probably at a higher risk of something compared to someone where their absolute number is just higher, but their mean change is not as high. In folks that are chronically elevated, so let's say they're, 55 hematocrit, we've done kind of whatever we can in terms of hydration, whatever. Yeah, my preference generally is not to do recurrent therapeutic phlebotomy, but really talk to them about either a dose reduction or changing the formulation. So now there's other formulations, topical therapy, which is a little bit more physiologic. It has its own nuances, but generally has a slightly lower risk in terms of polycythemia. And then kind of the newer, I guess, the last few years, there have been kind of 3 FDA-approved oral medications for testosterone therapy, which also have a slightly lower risk in terms of polycythemia. The tricky thing is coverage and, formularies. A lot of men, if they're trying to get it through their insurance company, it's a lot of hoops to jump through. And for your office, certainly can be a lot of heavy lifting in terms of authorization. There's kind of a cash pay option, which we utilize very frequently. It's called Casatrix, where patient just deals with the company directly in terms of the medication. And generally, it's fairly cost effective, especially if you're comparing it to something like topical testosterone. So, love to hear you guys' thoughts as well.
Yeah, I think the big picture is, again, testosterone may have some slight influence up or down, but it's lifestyle change that makes the most difference. So I don't care what you have to give them. They get them to exercise. It's worth the risk. And I actually do believe that testosterone does increase cardiac risk. It just on the whole, the averages say that people in the levels of 500-600 don't have that risk. But of course, you take a general population, there's probably some that are more predisposed. And as we push T higher and higher and higher, then all of a sudden that comes into focus. So it's not entirely safe, just like nothing in life is safe. But again, if you can get guys to change how, and men and women, remember that women have T levels 10 times higher than estrogen when they're premenopausal. And when they're postmenopausal, that plummets. And then bad things start happening as well. So as we replace testosterone levels, if we can get patients to change their behavior, that is the most important thing. And then the role of GLP agonists has to be in this equation, right? Because if I give you T that's absurdly high, you will lose fat and gain muscle. The data is quite clear, but it has to be pretty high. Same thing, if I give you GLP-1s, you will lose fat. And so that's equally probably good. So I think the future is this combinations of GLP-1s, diet, exercise, getting whatever patients we can to do these things, and then T in the appropriate patients.
And what is the role for pellets? And which is the right patient? And
Pellets are good for patients who don't want to self-inject, who can afford it and their insurance covers it. A lot of private, practices will make their own pellets, and so they'll be a little bit expensive, but people are willing to pay. Probably on the whole cheaper than the orals right now. We give a fair amount of pellets at Mayo, but it's kind of individualized preference. Probably it's better to do sub-Q weekly injections to avoid hematocrit spike. The higher you run people, the higher the dose, the more hematocrit will go up. You have to check for sleep apnea. you can adjust for, smoking or other things that move the needle. I personally don't believe that the crit level is that big of a deal because, if I move to Denver, does my stroke risk go up? No. It's a theoretical risk based on erythrocytosis data from cancer patients that are hypocoagulable in the first place. But medical legally, we probably need to act on it. And 54 is the number that you really need to change.
And Ryan, what's your lab regimen to monitor patients when they're on testosterone?
So typically, if I start someone on testosterone, I tend to be a little bit more conservative in how much I'm monitoring them at first. And then once I have them on a regimen I know that works, then I space things out because I think that things stabilized over time. So typically, if I start someone somewhere in the first 2 months, I'll have them get a repeat lab after they start injecting just to see if there is going to be what their increase is at. If everything looks good, then I start spacing them out. Then I do one at their 3-month follow-up. And then from there, I probably just go move on to 6 months or so, 6 months to yearly as time goes on.
And at each of those time points, you're checking T and CBC?
Yes.
Yeah. Any LFTs or no longer doing that?
LFTs and like a complete metabolic panel, I typically will start to do every 6 to 12 months.
Thanks.
Yeah, so the guidelines say you don't have to check LFTs, but many of us do. You're going to check PSA like you normally would. You screen men normally. Doesn't really change your management. I think when we talk about T replacement, we'd be remiss in not talking about Enclomiphene. So you guys know the company Hims and Hers, the like billion-dollar industry that, provides home medications for whomever, and they keep expanding what they provide. So they had a problem because they don't have offices in every state in the US. So they can't provide testosterone to everybody. Some of these online services do, but requires a licensure in each of the 50 states. So basically what Hims and Hers is like, okay, we're going to give Enclomiphene. And so any guy that has low T, they'll be like, take this pill and maybe you can raise your T level naturally. We would feel well. And frankly, I think it's probably a smarter approach. When you're checking T and is low, if their LH isn't through the roof, then probably Enclomiphene is going to raise their T level by a couple hundred points. Now, why haven't we been doing this for 20 years with Clomid? Because remember, clomiphene citrate has this racemic mixture of euclomiphene and zooclomiphene. Zooclomiphene bad, Enclomiphene good. And there's only 10% is zooclomiphene. But when we give men Clomid for fertility, we see this paradoxical decrease in sperm count in some. A lot of guys feel off. Their libido's not quite as good. When the drug androxyl was being tested, and this was Enclomiphene, which didn't get FDA approval, well, the results were awesome. Like patients had they didn't have paradoxical sperm count lowering. They felt better on the whole. And some of these concerns with Clomid proper went away. So I think it's probably most reasonable if you got the guy who's borderline, he's not severely hypogonadal, to give him Enclomiphene, which is 12.5 a day. It costs like $100 for a 3-month supply from any online pharmacy provider, $150, and see how they do. And if they feel better on that, you avoid all the shenanigans, right? Because by definition, they can't get super physiologic because you're using their own physiology. Some of them, it won't work because their LH is already too high and you can't whip the testicle into action anymore. It's just a dead horse. Those guys need T replacement. But I think this is what's going to be used much more commonly moving forward.
Any other questions from the audience? Joe?
So if you have a guy who has testosterone of 200 and you replace him and he has no real physiologic change, do you continue to treat him or do you say you're done?
Bless you.
So we bring their levels up higher and they have no symptomatic improvement. So I would talk to them about potentially discontinuing therapy. So we do that quite often. I would say probably 50% of the patients that we see, they have not necessarily low T, but they're just above the threshold, maybe 320 or 350. A lot of folks have gone to endocrinology and they were just told no, and then they kind of come to us for a second opinion. So in that sort of situation, typically I advocate for like a 3-month trial run, kind of get their levels a little bit better, make sure they're not having any side effects. And then if they have no improvement, talk about, hey, let's stop it. during that period that they even stop it, they may notice that, oh, wow, I actually don't feel as great as when I was on it. And then we may go back to it. But I think doing that kind of short trial run, generally they're going to rebound back to whatever levels that they had beforehand. There really shouldn't be any sort of long-term effects compared to, the bodybuilders and folks that are on it for years and years and years. Yes, in that sort of situation, they're kind of stuck because if they come off of it, they're not going to feel great.
And maybe last question for Toby. Toby is SMSNA president and board of directors of AUA. Have there ever been advocacy efforts to get testosterone covered? And if not, do you envision that in the future?
Yeah, no, that's happening next month. So there was a big win for women with, vaginal estrogen becoming black box label being removed, largely to the work of, advocates like Rachel Rubin. They went to the FDA, they testified, this is crazy. Why do you have this black box warning? And the FDA evolved. And so, they want parity. So now they want a panel about T in men. So that's exactly it. Our missions are to, number one, get testosterone approved for all forms of hypogonadism, both primary and secondary, because it makes no sense that you wouldn't support T replacement for guys who have primary or secondary testicular failure. It's dumb. It's like forbidding glasses because you're getting older. We do all these kind of things. So yes, these advocacy efforts are underway. Hopefully we'll move the needle and the label will continue to evolve even further. So we'll see what happens.
Well, with that, thank you.